Okay, so we're back. Springfield, Massachusetts, right here. New York, New York, right here. 100 miles. So, again, growing up, Boston, 82 miles, was typically when myself, my family, my friends wanted to take a day trip into a city. It was more often or not Boston. You get Northampton, Amherst, Brattleboro, Burlington up this direction, which was at least this as far as this distance frequent. Going down to Hartford, occasional. This direction, pretty much never. Had some family in the Berkshire Mountains. Camping, things like that. Yeah, but that wasn't really. So it was either pretty much north, east, and then south was here. I had my mother had a sister and her husband in New York City, and it was a major attraction. And growing up, there was reason to go down. And when I was old enough to take a bus, like 14, 15 years old, there was times I remember going down just to visit friends and stuff like that, or visit family, getting off at Grand Central and getting on whatever line I needed to get on, or walking around 42nd Street. So, mind you, I was born in 1973. So we're talking early 80s, mid 80s. And growing up in any urban environment, whether it's a tier one or a tier two city, and of course, getting back to kind of where we're going to end up in the Syracuse, Rochester, Buffalo, this whole sort of Erie Canal, what we call the Rust Belt at this point. The mid 80s was that, coming out of the 70s and the OPEC oil crisis, and coming out of the post-war sort of white flight and suburban development and mall development and all of that coming through, and the instability that downtowns and traditional urban cities had at that time. Syracuse was suffering, like many cities at these intersections of international federal highway systems and stuff like that. Suffered with, highway systems coming right through and splitting the city. And in Syracuse, it's a north-south highway system, east-west highway system. And in Springfield, where I grew up, it was actually a natural feature. It was a Connecticut River. So we have western and eastern, with the downtown kind of straddling mostly the eastern side. But you can pop across this bridge, and there's a lot of common reasons to go over here: shopping, restaurants, things of that nature. So pretty much the downtown of Springfield is this. And I grew up in a couple different neighborhoods, but by and large, where I grew up was just a few miles outside of the downtown. And 35, 40-minute walk, 10, 15-minute bike ride. If we're talking Syracuse again, imagine if this is downtown, this East Genesee Street, this being Salt Springs, actually where I'm making this video now. And I did measure it. It's exactly the same distance from the neighborhood I grew up in. So it's it's in the city, but it's not downtown. But the type of neighborhood I grew up in, on the other hand, was unique, because we had sort of the features of a urban environment, starting kind of right around here, going downhill towards the Connecticut River, and then these sort of like inner ring neighborhoods. And the one I grew up in was this one right here. So we called it the Village, and it was built in the 50s, I believe, for wartime families. And there's a Westover Air Force Base is just over this way. So it was, by the time I was living in it, excuse me, in the mid 80s, early 80s, it was a mix of older families, working class families that were living there, a generation or so after the end of the war, and now kind of lower income families, because this was all a sort of a government housing project. So it was a housing authority, subsidized housing. So if I zoom out a little bit, I want to connect the dots with the era in a second, where I started this off. But just, again, within a bike ride, I was downtown. I was anywhere I wanted to be, and I was frequently. But I had the blessings of this beautiful park behind a little elementary school where that was my basketball court. Those were my fields. My friends, we all played there. This is where life happened for us. And then this didn't exist. This was a huge open field and sand dunes. So this was all bike. We literally had BMX courses that we built in here, this whole acreage. This used to be an airstrip back in the day. But this was just abandoned area. So we kids ran this. We ran this and we ran this. This was it is an entire wooded area, very steep. There's a brook that runs in here. So we lived in here. We were crayfishing, we were turtle hunting, making tree forts, you name it. So I had paradise, and this is a shopping center with kind of big box and their little eateries and stuff like that. So, I did grow up in urban. I grew up in the city, but I also grew up kind of, with paper routes and all kinds of places to explore. As you can see, if I zoom out, we used to go tubing down here, swimming, fishing. There's lakes and ponds and water features and lots of greenery everywhere, basketball courts and baseball fields and soccer fields. So, Springfield, was a really cool city to grow up in many ways. But again, going back to 1980s, early 90s, this whole downtown was pretty much boarded up. The main street, there was a lot of shops were boarded up. It was depressing. This is all the north side, was gang territory. South side was gang territory. Near east side, there was areas you didn't want to be. Even elements in my neighborhood were pretty rough. It wasn't necessarily because Springfield was a rough and tumble city, and again, coming full circle to Syracuse, I don't think that it's in the nature of the people, but the times were tough economically, and it showed. It was the middle class was shrinking. It was tough for a lot of people to get by. And, this is in this neighborhood, this is where I grew up. All of these, I remember every single one of these houses. Kid riding my bike, my little BMX that I was always rebuilding and building and trading parts for. And, by the time I was in high school, my friends were afraid to pick me up in this neighborhood. My friend Mikey, who lived in this house right here with his family for a long time, was archetype of a lot of kids I grew up with. Didn't make it through junior high, I don't think. Got in fistfights with his teachers, go to visit him at his house, and there's porn on the TV, older brothers doing coke upstairs in the bathroom. I'm not trying to out people, but this is just the reality. I'd go visit other friends, cockroaches in the cabinets. And it wasn't every household, again, there was elderly families here. There was, working class families here. But by the time I was in high school, a lot of this was poor people. And today, I don't know how old this Google is. It's probably a few years old, but this is the first apartment I lived in. Within a year of living here, I was out in the backyard camping in a tent with a friend of mine, and we witnessed and saw somebody breaking into the apartment next door and called the police at like 2-3 in the morning. Used to have kids chase me there, used to get beat up, it was like little mini gang activity going on. But the Latin Kings were just, in the neighborhood and down the road, so big time too. And this is the apartment I spent most of my youth in, this one right here. So there was 4 little quad families. I had an aunt and uncle living in one unit for a while, so we kind of had like a little family deal. And then it's hard to see, but there was, without zooming out, I guess I can do that. Um, Big backyard. It's this guy here. So this was all greenery, playing wiffle ball, soccer, running around, little shed in the back. So, you know, just I kind of want to lay out like contextually like what my experience was growing up. Again, had family within this neighborhood over here, which were more traditional kind of colonial, single family, split family homes. This is where I made my money mowing lawns and shoveling driveways and paper routes and stuff. And then big high school, junior high school complex that was right here with its kind of amenities nearby. And then this is a huge kind of strip mall with a movie theater. And then before my time runs out on this, if I pull this out a little bit more, again, there was stunning parks, swimming pools and babbling brooks and areas to go. So as a child growing up, I had the best of both worlds. I had this kind of environment. I had eventually when I went to high school, which is in the outer areas, kind of back and forth. Wilbraham is where I went to school here, which we'll touch on next. But I also was, a walk, a bus ride, or a bike ride to right smack dab in the middle of the hustle and bustle of downtown. So I'm going to pause it here, and we'll pick it up in the next chapter.